The family failure. Those 3 words changed everything. I still remember exactly how my father's voice sounded when he said it. Cold, dismissive, final. Like he was simply stating a fact about the disappointment standing before him in his pristine kitchen. His only daughter, 25 years old, jobless. Again. I didn't say a word back. Instead, I walked out with $732.16 in my bank account and a promise to myself. One day, he'd regret those words so deeply that the memory would burn in his throat like acid. I just never expected 15 million people would watch it happen. I still remember how the morning light cut through our kitchen window, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air as he stood over me, disappointment etched into every line of his face. I was 25, jobless again, and back in my childhood bedroom. Not exactly the American dream he'd imagined for his only daughter. "When are you going to grow up, Jordan?" he said, voice low but cutting. "Your brother's already made partner at his firm. Your cousin just bought her second house." He shook his head, the gesture so familiar it made my stomach clench. "I'm starting to think you're just the family failure." The family failure. 3 simple words that somehow managed to encapsulate everything I'd been afraid of my entire life. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I'd been trying? That the startup I'd poured 3 years of my life into had collapsed? That the economy was tough? All excuses he'd heard before, all reasons he no longer believed. Instead, I walked out of the kitchen, packed my bags, and left my parents' suburban home without a goodbye. I had $732.16 in my bank account, a computer science degree I'd never fully utilized, and a burning desire to never see that look of disappointment on my father's face again. That was 4 years ago. My name is Jordan Taylor, and what happened next was an overnight success. It wasn't a lottery win or a lucky break. What happened was harder, slower, and ultimately more satisfying. I crashed on my friend Mia's couch in Boston for 2 weeks while I hunted for jobs. Not the glamorous tech positions I'd always chased before, just something steady, something to build from. I landed a job as a junior IT specialist at a small medical billing company. The pay was mediocre, the work mind-numbing, but it was a start. Every night after my 9 to 5, I would open my laptop and work on my real passion, a machine learning algorithm that could predict trends in consumer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. It was similar to what I'd tried with my failed startup, but with a crucial difference: experience. I now understood where I'd gone wrong before. "Girl, you need to get out more," Mia would say, walking past me hunched over my computer at 2 a.m. "This isn't healthy." Maybe it wasn't, but health wasn't my priority. Vindication was. 6 months in, I had enough saved to rent a tiny studio apartment. It was barely bigger than a closet in a building with questionable heating and a neighbor who practiced saxophone at midnight, but it was mine. I tacked a note above my desk. The family failure, with a question mark that felt like a challenge. Every time I felt like giving up, I'd look at that note and hear my father's voice. The memory was like fuel. I developed my algorithm further, refining it, testing it against real-world data. I started freelancing on the side, taking on data analysis projects that helped me build connections in the industry. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. 1 year in, I met Ethan at a tech meetup I'd forced myself to attend. He was brilliant, a full-stack developer with a keen business sense who saw potential in my work when I finally worked up the nerve to show it to her. "This is actually good," she said, scrolling through my code with raised eyebrows. "Like, really good. Have you thought about seeking investment?" I hadn't. The failure of my previous startup had left me gun-shy about taking on investors. But Ethan was persuasive, and more importantly, she knew people. Within a month, we were meeting with angel investors who didn't laugh us out of the room. The first round of funding was modest, $150,000, but it allowed me to quit my IT job and focus full-time on what we now called Predict Patterns. Ethan came on as co-founder and CTO. We rented a small office space, hired 2 junior developers, and got to work turning my algorithm into a marketable product. During this time, I barely spoke to my family. My mother called occasionally, and I'd give her brief updates, always steering the conversation away from my father. She never pushed, understanding the chasm that had formed between us. My brother, Ryan, sent texts on holidays. I'd reply with generic well wishes, ignoring his attempts to mediate a reconciliation. "He misses you," he texted once. "He won't say it, but he does." I didn't respond. The pain was still too raw, the memory of his words too vivid. 2 years after leaving home, Predict Patterns secured a second round of funding, $2 million. Our team expanded to 15 people. The algorithm was now a fully fledged platform that businesses could use to anticipate market shifts and consumer preferences with startling accuracy. Success wasn't immediate or guaranteed. We had technical setbacks, lost a major client 3 months in, and nearly ran out of money before our product was market ready. Ethan and I worked 80-hour weeks, surviving on coffee and takeout, pushing through problems that seemed insurmountable at 3 a.m. But slowly, steadily, things began to click. Our client list grew. Industry blogs started mentioning us. A tech journal published a small feature on our innovative approach to predictive analytics. I didn't tell my family about any of it. 3 years after that fateful morning in my parents' kitchen, Predict Patterns was valued at $40 million. We had offices in Boston and San Francisco, a team of 70 employees, and a client list that included 2 Fortune 500 companies. I had moved from my closet-sized studio to a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But success felt hollow without acknowledgement from the one person who had doubted me most. I was browsing social media one evening when I saw a post from my hometown's local business association. They were hosting their annual entrepreneurship conference and looking for speakers. On impulse, I sent an email offering my services. Within hours, I received an enthusiastic response. They'd be honored to have the founder of Predict Patterns speak at their event. The conference was scheduled for the following month. I didn't tell my family I was coming home. Instead, I had the organizers promote my session heavily. Hometown success story: how Jordan Taylor built a $40 million tech company. I knew my father, ever involved in local business networks, would see it. Whether he would attend was another question entirely. The morning of the conference, I stood backstage, adjusting my custom-tailored suit and trying to calm my racing heart. I'd given dozens of presentations to rooms full of tech executives without breaking a sweat. Why was I so nervous now? Because this wasn't about business. This was personal. From my position behind the curtain, I scanned the filling auditorium. And then I saw him, sitting near the back, his hair grayer than I remembered, my mother beside him, looking anxious but proud. They had come. The moderator introduced me with a glowing biography that highlighted Predict Patterns' meteoric rise. As I walked onto the stage in my tailored blazer and heels, the applause was deafening, but I only heard the silence from the back row where my father sat, his expression unreadable. I began my presentation with practiced ease, discussing market trends, machine learning applications, and the future of predictive analytics. But as I neared the end, I departed from my usual script. 4 years ago, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Someone very close to me called me the family failure. A hush fell over the room. I could feel every eye on me, including his. At the time, I was jobless, living with my parents, and had just watched my first business attempt crash and burn. From the outside, maybe I did look like a failure. I paused, making brief eye contact with my father. But that moment, painful as it was, became my turning point. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we can truly rise. I continued, describing the long nights, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, and the eventual breakthroughs. I didn't paint myself as a hero or my father as a villain, just told the honest story of a journey that began with harsh words and culminated in unexpected success. As I concluded, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Through the blur of movement, I saw my father remain seated, his face now visibly shaken. After the presentation, I was surrounded by well-wishers and potential investors. It took nearly an hour before I could break away. When I finally did, I found my parents waiting at the edge of the crowd. My mother embraced me immediately, tears streaming down her face. "We're so proud of you," she whispered. My father stood awkwardly behind her, looking older and smaller than I remembered. When our eyes met, I saw something I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. "Jordan," he began, his voice rougher than I recalled. That was impressive. Not an apology, not direct acknowledgement of his past words. But from my father, this was significant. "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Been a long road." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until he cleared his throat. "Your brother mentioned you might be looking to expand. I've got some connections in commercial real estate if you're interested." It was his way of extending an olive branch, offering the only thing he knew how to give: practical help. Before I could respond, a young man approached with his phone out. "Miss Taylor? Would you mind if I got a quick video for my business class? Your story is so inspiring." I agreed, and as she recorded, I gave a brief version of my journey from family failure to tech success. My father stood just out of frame, watching silently. What happened next changed everything. The video went viral. I didn't expect it. The guy had posted it on his YouTube channel with the caption, "She was called the family failure, but built a $40 million company instead. Hashtag revenge, hashtag success, hashtag inspiration, hashtag women in tech." By the next morning, it had over 2 million views. By the end of the week, 15 million. It was picked up by business channels, motivational accounts, and eventually mainstream media. The part that resonated most with viewers, the part they kept sharing and commenting on, was the brief moment when I first mentioned being called the family failure. The camera had inadvertently panned to the audience, capturing my father's face as the words left my mouth. His expression, a complex mixture of shock, shame, and dawning recognition, became the thumbnail image for countless shares. While I was flying back to Boston, my phone exploded with notifications. Ethan called, his voice excited. "Jordan, have you seen what's happening? We've had over 1,000 new business inquiries since yesterday." The publicity was doing wonders for Predict Patterns, but I felt a knot in my stomach. I hadn't intended for my father to become collateral damage in my success story. Revenge suddenly felt less sweet than I'd imagined. I tried calling him that evening. No answer. I texted my mother, who responded cryptically, "He needs time. This has been difficult." It wasn't until 3 days later that I heard from Ryan. Dad's being recognized everywhere he goes, he explained. At the grocery store, at church, even at his golf club. Everyone's seen the video. Some people are sympathetic, but others, he trailed off, are making him feel horrible. I finished, the realization hitting me hard. Yeah, he confirmed. He hasn't left the house in 2 days. This wasn't what I wanted. Yes, I'd wanted him to acknowledge his mistake, to feel some measure of regret for dismissing me so completely. But I hadn't wanted public humiliation. The revenge I'd sought for years suddenly felt hollow, even cruel. That night, I booked a flight back to my hometown. When I arrived at my parents' house the next afternoon, it was my mother who answered the door. She looked tired but offered a small smile. "He's in his study," she said quietly. "Has been since all this started." I found my father sitting in his old leather chair, staring out the window. He didn't turn when I entered, but I could see his reflection in the glass. He looked defeated. "Dad," I said softly. He turned slowly. "Come to survey the damage?" His voice lacked its usual authority. I shook my head and took a seat across from him. "That wasn't my intention. With the video, I mean..." "But the speech was," he replied, not accusatory but matter-of-fact. "You wanted me to know you'd proven me wrong." I couldn't deny it. "Yes." A long silence stretched between us before he spoke again. "I deserved it." Those 3 words, so simple yet so unexpected, caught me off guard. In all my imagined scenarios of this confrontation, I'd never pictured my father acknowledging fault so plainly. "When you left," he continued, "I was angry, thought you were running away from responsibility. Again." He rubbed his face tiredly. "Took me months to realize I was the one who drove you away. By then, my pride wouldn't let me reach out." He laughed humorlessly. "Some father, huh?" I didn't know how to respond. For years, I'd carried my resentment like armor, defining myself in opposition to his judgment. Now, faced with his vulnerability, that armor felt suddenly heavy and unnecessary. "I built my company partly to prove you wrong," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "And I was wrong. Spectacularly wrong." He gestured vaguely toward the world outside, where his shame had become public consumption. "Now everyone knows it." Something shifted inside me then. The vindication I'd sought for so long was here, but it brought no joy. Instead, I felt a strange, unexpected grief for all the years we'd lost to stubborn pride, his and mine. "The video will blow over," I said, though we both knew that on the internet, nothing truly disappears. "Maybe," he conceded. "But you know what's strange? In all this humiliation, there's one thing I keep coming back to." He met my eyes directly. "My daughter built something remarkable, and I had nothing to do with it." The pain in his voice was genuine, and it struck a chord in me I hadn't expected to feel. For all his faults, my father had always believed in achievement, in leaving a mark on the world. His methods may have been harsh, but his intention, to push his children toward success, had never been malicious. "That's not entirely true," I said after a moment. "When you called me a failure, it lit a fire. I wouldn't have pushed so hard without that moment." A sad smile crossed his face. Small comfort. We sat in silence again, the afternoon light fading around us. Finally, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "What's this?" he asked as I handed it to him. Predict Patterns is launching a foundation to support young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. I explained. "We need someone with experience in traditional business models to help evaluate applicants and provide mentorship." He opened the folder, scanning the proposal inside with confusion. "And you want me?" I nodded. "The position comes with a seat on our advisory board. It's part-time, but it would require regular trips to Boston." He stared at the documents, then at me, understanding slowly dawning on his face. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a path to redemption, a way for him to be part of my success story rather than its antagonist. "Why would you do this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "After everything?" I considered my answer carefully, because proving you wrong wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be, and because maybe we both deserve a second chance. My father, a man who had never been comfortable with emotional displays, blinked rapidly. "I don't deserve this opportunity." "Probably not," I agreed, surprising him with my honesty. "But the foundation needs someone like you. And maybe—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "Maybe I need my dad." Those words, the admission of a need I denied for years, seemed to hit him harder than any viral humiliation. His hand, when it reached for mine across the space between us, trembled slightly. "I can't promise I'll be good at this," he warned. "Neither can I replied. "But we can try." 2 months later, my father moved into a small apartment in Boston, just 10 minutes from the Predict Patterns office. His role with the foundation quickly expanded as his business acumen proved valuable in ways I hadn't anticipated. He had a gift for identifying promising entrepreneurs who lacked resources but not determination, people I realized much like I had been. The viral video eventually faded from public consciousness, as these things do, but its impact remained, transforming both our professional and personal landscapes in unexpected ways. Predict Patterns continued to grow, eventually attracting acquisition offers from several tech giants. When we finally agreed to sell for $220 million, my father was in the room serving as an advisor during negotiations. The moment the papers were signed, he was the first person I looked at. The pride in his eyes was worth more than the massive figure on the check. Our relationship wasn't magically repaired overnight. We still disagreed, still occasionally fell into old patterns. But there was a new foundation of respect that made those conflicts less devastating, more navigable. One evening, about a year after the video went viral, we were sharing dinner at my apartment when he brought it up. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, the public nature of it all. I considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I think about where we are now, and I'm not sure we would have gotten here without it." He nodded thoughtfully. "When I called you a failure that day, I was talking about myself as much as you. I'd failed at my own dreams, settled for less than I wanted. Seeing you struggle felt like watching history repeat itself." It was the most insight he'd ever offered into his own psychology, and it shifted my understanding of our entire history. "We're both works in progress," I said simply. He raised his glass in agreement. "To works in progress, then." As we continued our meal, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. I had wanted revenge, had pursued success as a weapon to wield against my father's judgment. But in the end, the most powerful form of vindication wasn't proving him wrong. It was finding a way for both of us to be right, to acknowledge our flaws, learn from our mistakes, and build something neither of us could have created alone. The family failure, it turned out, hadn't been a person at all. It had been our inability to see beyond our own pain and pride to the possibility of reconciliation. And that, unlike viral humiliation or even business success, was a failure we could fix together. 6 months later, I was invited back to my hometown's business conference. this time with my father as a co-presenter. Our topic, family business dynamics, turning conflict into collaboration. As we took the stage together, someone in the audience held up their phone to record. My father noticed and, instead of shrinking away, smiled directly into the camera. "Go ahead," he said, his voice strong and clear. "This is one video I wouldn't mind going viral." The audience laughed, and I joined them, realizing that the sweetest revenge isn't making someone regret their words through your success. It's growing enough to render those words irrelevant and bringing the person who spoke them along with you on the journey forward. Sometimes, true victory isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving that both of you can change.